Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another mentoring session. Thank you so much for making the time to join us and to join yet another incredibly fruitful conversation. The mentoring program that we run every year as part of 𝗓𝗵𝗂𝗶 in partnership with 𝗕𝗏𝗕𝗏𝗂𝗐𝗵𝗵 Coaching and Consulting. We have an open session every month that tackles the topic that the mentees are going through and that they're learning more about. And today's topic is particularly very exciting. I'm going to hand you over to 𝗕𝗵𝗂𝗶, who is the mentor that is facilitating tonight's discussion alongside 𝗕𝗏𝗕. Lady, take it away.
Thank you, Raksha.
Okay. Thanks, Raksha. Good evening, everybody. Thank you guys for making time. We understand it's load shedding, but we really appreciate you taking your time off in this evening to join us. Like Raksha mentioned, we're discussing a very interesting topic this evening, talking about competence. So we're talking about cultivating competence and remaining relevant in this changing world. I believe that COVID-19 really has taught us a lot, that our career or our workplaces are no longer the same post-COVID, starting from COVID. So we had to learn new competencies during COVID and afterwards. So we thought it's important that we discuss this topic. And on our panel this evening, we've got Dr. 𝗕𝗏𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏, Mr. John Roth, and Mr. 𝗕𝗏𝗕𝗏𝗂𝗏. So we can start with Dr. 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Can you kindly just give us a brief background of who you are?
Good evening. Thank you very much, 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. I'm 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. I have a long history working. I graduated in 1986. I'm mentioning that on purpose so that people can sort of do the arithmetic. I'm a medical doctor by training, and I then also specialized in public health medicine. That medicine is, it's not clinical. It's not about, a one-on-one relationship. It's looking at policies, it's looking at, things like the cholera outbreak right now. Public health medicine people will be saying, how do you control this? How do you prevent disease? Because my passion is about prevention of disease. It's not about treating people. I then have worked in a number of settings in the public sector, in a municipality, and that's actually where I got my passion for public health, because in that environment, you need to be preventing disease. I have also worked at the National Department of Health in a position where I was coordinating the health sector in the SADC region. I also worked at DBSA as a health policy analyst, and
oh no.
All right, well, let's move on to the next panelist while Tutula's getting her power back.
Okay, Mr. John Roth, you may briefly just tell us who you are and your brief background.
Sure, thank you. I just first of all want to say that it's a privilege to be part of this process, and I just acknowledge everyone in the room as having your own competence, your own strengths, and the fact that you've worked hard to get to this place where you are. So I honor you. I'm a nature guide. I share nature with people as my profession. I've been doing that since 1989. And I have, in the last 5 years, been freelancing as a professional nature guide. I've worked in government, I've worked in the private sector, but always around sharing nature with people and encouraging people to care for the earth. So the last 5 years, a journey of figuring out how to make a small business work. COVID arrived in the middle of that process, which really threw things around a bit. And part of that rejuggling was a discovery that people are really interested, the public, are really interested in geology if you make it interesting and fun. So I'm not a professional geologist, but I'm an educational geologist. And I suppose a significant journey that I'm sharing with you this evening is one of discovering how to make geology interesting for the public.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Jermaine, quickly just take us through who you are and then your career background as well.
Okay, I'm 𝗕𝗵𝗶cie I am the General Manager of African Mineral Standards, or AMIS. And unlike John and Tuthula, I have worked for this is my first job still. I've been in this industry, mineral services essentially, and we create what we call in our industry certified reference materials. I've done this for 11 years. Before then, I was a student assistant and at the Petroleum Agency South Africa, because my background is in petroleum geology. And before then I was a student. So this is still the first job that I've had. It's just, it has morphed into different positions over time. I started out at AMIS as an intern in 2012. I graduated in 2010, started out at AMIS in 2012. As an intern. A few months later, I became a technical sales specialist, and that is obviously outside of the field of geology. And at the time, it really felt like I was, it's a stopgap, because I wanted to be a real scientist. But 11 years later, I find myself at the same organization. It looks completely different than what it was when I started. Through that time, I had to talk my ego down. Went to different interviews for different positions at different organizations, and every single time when I did get a job at a different organization, there was always something that kept me back where I am now, and I am happy for the decision that I've made. It has changed the man that I am today and the man that I still want to be. I'm still going to be with this organization probably for a very long time, and I hope I can delve into my experience here and how I had to change my Cultivate and add some value for you guys tonight.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Dr. Tuthula, we're happy to have you back. You may quickly maybe just summarize what you were saying. No worries.
Yeah, no, I was saying that I've been, in government, in the private sector, and I've been now with Minerals Council. This is my 15th year. And when I arrived, I had only worked, the longest I had worked in any organization was 6 years. And I came in thinking I would stay 5 years and leave. But I'm still here, and I think there's various reasons, I can talk about how, in terms of how you can stay longer in an organization and not feel very bored.
Okay.
So perhaps I can ask a question at this point, 𝗕𝗵𝗶. I think so many of us start our careers thinking, well, I've now got my degree, that makes me competent. I'm a geologist, or I'm a medical doctor, or I'm a metallurgist, and that's what I'm competent in. And I want us to explore a little bit about the question around the competencies that get us to where we are aren't necessarily the competencies that make us really good once we're there. And that navigation of shifting from one set of competencies that brought you to your current position, and the realization that you needed to develop a different set of competencies in order to succeed in your current position. And I'm wondering, perhaps Jermaine, because you've talked about this a little bit already, perhaps you can talk about your journey of navigating different competencies and what you've learned along the way.
Yeah, okay. So essentially, when you come out of university, right, you think you're competent as a geologist, but the first thing that I realized there when I graduated and got into my first job is that I was not competent at all as a geologist. In fact, I probably knew nothing practically as a geologist. I didn't, because I was not a researcher per se. I just had wrote my thesis, and I was only not even competent, knowledgeable about what I knew about that thesis. I had forgotten everything about undergraduate, because the undergraduate was going to pass and get your degree, right? So no one is going to deem you competent before that time. So now when you do your honors or your masters, you focus on a specific field. And there are so many other fields related to that. If you're not a pragmatist and you're not in the industry specifically, you know a lot about that. So again, I was not competent. But as a student coming out, I've graduated from stellenbosch, and I felt like, you know, I'm a big deal because I made it from stellenbosch. Just to find out that I had zero pedigree to fall back on, and I was just another average student from another university, and there were hundreds, if not thousands of us out there with exactly the same qualification and with even more experience, because most of them probably did vacational work or whatever it was, and I had none of that. And so I had to like let the ego go of being a graduate or coming from Stellenbosch. I mean, we all have that. We're all proud of it, and it's something that we should celebrate. But at that point, the only competency that I probably had was to articulate myself well enough in an interview to be able to obtain the job that I got, or the internship. And that in itself is probably what university had taught, is just to be able to articulate yourself well enough in order to convince people who's listening to you that you have the competency to be in that organization, and they could take the risk on you because you are a blank slate, and they all knew that. Hence the position was an internship position. And so over the years, from starting out my career, I had to build a level of competence. Just today, I was sharing with my teammates a document that my manager at the time, and I had great managers, and I think that's one of the reasons why I am where I am today. The first manager that I had, she was she had a BCom in informatics or something like that. And she gave me a document to tell me how to write emails. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is this? But I didn't ask too much questions. I didn't have the credibility and the leg to stand on to ask any questions. And so I did exactly what she told me to the T. And once she deemed me competent, I mean, there's a level of competence. Okay, this guy can, you know, send an email, he can attach this thing, he can speak knowledgeable about the products. Only then I knew that she trusted me when the first set of retrenchments came through. And that meant now people were being cut out because our manager at the time had hired too many interns. The group wasn't happy. We were on the chopping block. It was 1 year later, and I'm like, okay, let's see. And she happened to keep me because I chose to write the emails the way she told me to write the emails. And that simple thing made her choose me to stay in that organization a little bit later. And that's just one thing. I mean, was I really competent in anything else other than speaking to clients or speaking to people and sending emails and doing all of this? You know, there's other things that you come with university from, and one of them is, you know, you get a lot of Excel and all these other things that the technical stuff, or, you know, the softer things that we need to do to be able to function in today's world. So those things, they didn't ask those questions. You still needed to know those things. And I think most of the time nowadays, we don't see those as competencies, but as necessities in order to do your work, right? And so those things I had, but I still needed to send an email in a way that she deemed fine. And I am happier for it because it did teach me something. It taught me to stick it out a little, take the time and do what you are asked exactly in the way that you are asked. And later when initiative is asked to put in, then you put initiative in. Also, obviously, there are certain instances where they are not around and you should be able to take initiative because it's a test. In that sense, it's still a test. And so that was the first part. When I entered my career, there was a big shocker. Okay, they're asking you to send an email. And I did it. And I mean, from that point to this point, there has been a ton of things in the process. I became responsible for a team at a certain point. I was responsible for our website, for the back end of it. I was responsible for how do I make my website more visible to the world to see? Now, that has nothing to do with geology. And essentially, one can argue sometimes that has nothing to do with running a business successfully as a manager. But I learned how to do it, got the certificate, and started to do that for the business myself. And we were able to generate revenue in that instance. Now, again, in geology, they're not talking about revenue or anything like that. But now I was interested in revenue because I was in sales. Revenue gave me a picture almost into, or let me say a window into what a business is about, how to run a business, what drives a business, all the things to generate that revenue. And 1,000 things in between from that moment to now has led me to become a general manager, as I will continue in this conversation. But that's just an introduction to, my transition in competencies.
And I think you've made a couple points there that I really want to kind of pull out for everybody. The first one is we so often think about competence as being our knowledge. And when we want to upskill ourselves, we often go straight to, let me get another certificate, let me obtain more knowledge. But what you've said so elegantly is that knowledge is one dimension of competence, but your attitude, your behaviors, your embracing learning, embracing being told what to do and how to do it is another dimension of competence. And the third dimension is practicing something over and over until you get it, till you master the skill and you build up your bank of experience. I think the other thing that you've mentioned is you started out as a geologist, but you're not working as a geologist, and the openness to stripping yourself of the label of geologist and starting to be able to view yourself as a kind of a basket of different skills and competencies is crucial to being able to navigate our careers. And so I want to thank you for making those points, because I think those are important for all of us when we're looking at competent for what. Because competent for being an intern and sending emails is very different to being competent for the position of general manager, irrespective of what your kind of starting degree was. So thank you, Jermaine. Perhaps we can hear from John and Tutula on kind of to further elaborate on this.
Well, my first thought was, sorry, Tutula, do you want to carry on?
No, you can go on.
Okay. My first thought was what key competency has sort of helped me most on this path, and I think it's probably the slow to learn, but I'm getting it better and better, is the ability to listen. To be able to listen to groups of people, to be able to listen to my own inner narrative, to be able to, I suppose, read what's happening in the world around me, and to try not to be too quick to jump to conclusions, but to just keep listening. I think that's been a really significant competence that's emerged for me in the last 15 years.
Okay. No, what I can add is I think Jermaine's experience is a very good sort of example of how behaviors, are essential. I've just completed, a coaching course. So unfortunately, maybe then I will sort of be more into there is a framework, for competency, which is it's your behaviors, your experience, your knowledge, your skills, your aptitude, and most certainly, I think it was Jermaine's behaviors that put him a step ahead of everyone. And in all jobs, I think maybe I'll look at the current doctors, new doctors. With us, it was very easy. All doctors had jobs, you had your pick, but things have changed in South Africa such that you've got doctors now who are unemployed. And so doctors come out with knowledge. They also come out with skills, because you do your theory, but you also then practice. You know, in your 5th year, your 6th year, and into your internship, it's all practical. It's similar to, vocational schools, if I can put it like that. They put out people with a skill. So doctors have knowledge, they have skills. Therefore, when it comes to that, they are all equal. They are quite competent. And the challenge now, because there are no jobs, government can't employ them beyond the community service. They don't have the money to employ them. Then you really need to distinguish yourself. And what I have seen is things like, you know, getting that additional, for instance, if you want to specialize, then you write the exams even earlier than what would be required. So in a way, you are distinguishing yourself, doing courses, you know, such that if there are 100 applicants, you are standing out. So what I'm trying to say is that it's important to also see how you can adjust to the circumstances and be able to stand out and check what do you need to improve. Is it your knowledge, or is it your skills, or the behaviors, again, your attitude? I mean, some employers do say, or managers do say that they would prefer someone with a good attitude compared to someone who's knowledgeable. Because the person who has a good attitude, you can teach them anything. Whereas the person with knowledge and a poor attitude, you know, they will not be going very far. Thanks.
Okay. Oh, great stuff. Thank you, everyone. Dr. Tutula, you've elaborated so much on what we actually wanted to get to in terms of the levers that one can pull to sharpen one's competence. You've spoken about skills, you've spoken about behavior, you've spoken about the knowledge. What other things that a person needs to have or can consider doing to sharpen one's competence? Maybe Mr. Roff, you can maybe help us there.
I was just picturing in my mind a person standing at the edge of a river and wanting to cross, but not knowing how deep the water is. And is there a bridge? Will it be safe? Will I fall in? It's the step into the unknown that is also a type of competence, being able to say, I'm not quite sure how this is going to work out, but I'm going to take a step forward in faith and trust that I will be carried on this journey. And it might be a bit difficult, but it's taking that step into an unknown realm that is really helpful.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Can I jump in here, Mpho? All three of you are talking about behaviors. All three of you are talking about having the behaviors that help you take your technical competence from being academic through to actually being applied. If you're not willing to take a chance, if you're not willing to listen, if you're not willing to get out of your comfort zone and step into the river, step into the unknown, it doesn't matter how technically brilliant you are, you're not giving yourself the opportunity to actually build up your experience and test and calibrate and recalibrate and figure out what you're good at doing. And I think that's a point that needs to come through so clearly to everybody, is that so many people that come through the mentoring program with WIMSA and so many people that I meet through the coaching work that I do are technically brilliant people, but because their behaviors hold them back in advocating, in being willing to take a risk, in being willing to fail, and being willing to get something wrong, they so often get held back in their careers, and they see other people who are less technically competent passing them by, people who are far more comfortable to advocate and listen and take risks. And I really want that to come through here, and perhaps we can talk a little bit more about some of the risks that the three of you have taken, or key behaviors that you think have really catapulted you in your careers. John, you've talked about listening, and maybe we can hear, maybe you can elaborate on how that's helped you, and then explore more of this with Tutula and Jermaine.
Well, I've struggled my whole life with a low self-confidence, not believing that I'm particularly good at certain things, despite people telling me that I am good. So part of that listening journey has been listening to people who I trust, who I know well, and believing them. And then kind of acting on their opinions and advice. You know, if 5 good friends tell you the same thing in a similar way, then you pay attention. And I think just that simple act of listening to people and starting to believe that they could be right has really helped me. It certainly was the key to get me going into this line of work.
I think
maybe.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I say that maybe I'm not starting on the positive note you want, Briony? I'm starting to say there is a challenge, you know, just like John was saying, he did not have self-confidence. With women especially, and myself included, it's difficult to be confident. You know, you have the same knowledge as the next person, but you second guess yourself. I mean, we know whenever there's women discussions, we talk about the imposter syndrome. You feel you are not quite supposed to be in the room. And so it's important for us to know that it's normal to feel that maybe you are not quite it, you know, you suppose there's the other people are better. And despite that, you need to overcome and launch yourself into, you know, the next thing. For instance, for men, it's said, when they see an advert and there's 10 requirements, they think, I see 2, I'm okay, I must apply. With women, we'll want to have 8, I must tick 8 boxes before I think, you know, I'm the right person. So what I have discovered is almost anyone can, you know, with application, can move and do something different. So you need to trust yourself, you know, that you can do something different. You can learn, you will need to put in a lot of effort into it. You'll need to, if it is a skill, you acquire the skill. If it is knowledge, you acquire the knowledge. It's about what is it you need to put in for you to fit in there. But just about everyone really can always, with intent, you know, and a good approach and attitude, you can really learn a lot and you move ahead. So never sort of feel you are inadequate and therefore don't try something. Try it and you are actually going to learn and, you know, move on to the next level.
Absolutely. You can't think yourself into being successful. You act yourself into being successful. You have to take action and build up the experience. And I think to kind of take what you're saying, confidence doesn't come from thinking I'm confident. Confidence has a direct relationship to allowing yourself to be vulnerable. The more you are vulnerable and you allow yourself to make mistakes and get out of your comfort zone, the more you calibrate what you're able to do, and that builds up confidence. And and so what you're saying, I think, is so important, because we so often hold ourselves back thinking, instead of just dipping our toes in the water or the river that John talked about and trying and knowing that it's okay to fail.
The other thing you need to be careful about is being a big fish in a small pond.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes we want to be in a comfort zone, which means you are a fish in water. But you must always be saying, am I allowing myself to be in the pond and in the lake and in the sea, you know, and therefore I am growing. I'm not this huge fish in a small pond, and therefore I feel good because I'm in this small pond. You must allow yourself to get into the ocean.
Yeah. And every time you get into a bigger pond, there will be things that you don't know. And that whole journey of building competence starts all over again. And perhaps that's something that we can explore. And John, this is one of the reasons we wanted you on this panel, is you posted such a thought-provoking post on LinkedIn the other day about not knowing, and very articulately being able to say to people, I don't know the answer, but I want to learn. I want to find out the answer. And maybe you can just share a little bit about the backstory to that.
Well, the older I get as a nature guide, the more I realize how much there is to learn about all these different fields. And specifically going into geological guiding, which I couldn't find anybody in the world who's doing exactly the same thing as this. It's really an unknown. So I'm very much finding my way and relying as I go on a whole range of different people who can help me. So I suppose one of my starting points has been, I know that I don't know a lot. I know enough to be able to make sense of geology for most people who are not professionals, but at every turn I bump into something that I simply don't know. And part of being a good guide for others, I suppose, is to walk alongside them. And walking alongside a person, if you want to be, if you have that gift of empathy and you want to walk alongside somebody, then you want to walk alongside them with kindness and with respect, which by necessity means not causing that person to think that you are greater and they are lesser. So you want to walk together. And in a way, I go out of my way to look for places where I don't understand everything, because it's common ground with the people who I'm leading. So I will intentionally look for a space in a conversation where neither of us really know what's going on, and we can spend a bit of time there. And I might also encourage people who I'm guiding to share what they know about something, and they probably about some field will know more than me. And that makes us all feel a whole lot more comfortable, and then somehow more capable of discovering things together.
Sounds like great principles for leadership, if you ask me. If we could all lead from a space of not knowing and inviting others to share with us, we would have some great leaders. Jermaine, do you want to add to that?
Yes. Dr. Tutula, I have a question. You became a medical doctor. You graduated, as you said, in 1986, right? And so my question is, did you graduate in South Africa in 1986?
Yes, I did. I graduated in University of Natal Black section, because at that time the university was a white university.
The reason why I asked that question is because there's the context of apartheid South Africa in 1986 and your willingness to become a doctor in that environment. And we all know that was not easy by no stretch of the imagination. There was a hard thing that you had to do, and you did it. I don't know the support that you got from your family. I don't know the internal grit that you have, but nevertheless, you were supposed to have an unnatural kind of grit to achieve that in that environment. Because what we are told about South Africa in that time was it was very difficult for any person of color, let alone a Black woman, to achieve such feat. So my thing is, when it comes to where you want to go and the work that you need to put in, is that you need to want it first. And when you need to want it, then you need to kind of work your way to a path to getting it. Let's say, for example, you are a bookkeeper. You've become a bookkeeper, but you want to become the CFO of whatever organization in the future. Now, what is that going to look like? There are tons of functional competencies that you are going to have to learn to actually get to a level where you, let's say, become a CA, if that's the requirement to become a CFO, or the people in that organization will have to look at the competencies that you've built over time, and it's probably going to be a prolonged time or if you start your own business, there are certain things that you're going to have to achieve in order to become a CFO. But it all starts with what I call, or actually Angela Duckworth calls, grit. They have done tons of studies of people who wanted something and wanted to go somewhere. And what all of those people had in common is they had this uncanny ability to work hard and to want it, even if there's a level of arrogance that you need to have to want something, to step out of your comfort zone. Then you have to have that balance between being arrogant and being humble so that you can actually push yourself forward in a way that is still deemed positive to the world, because you still want to project that. Most people in the world that we know and that we deem successful based on what they've achieved, i.e., Richard Branson or Elon Musk or any of these people who we all deem successful today, they have one thing in common, is that they work exceptionally hard in a way that most of us can't. And that's probably my biggest flaw, is that I'm not consistent in hard work as I would like to be, but I try every day. And my philosophy is that every day you start anew, afresh, even if you failed the day before, because it's all in that consistency over time, every single day, not necessarily the consistency in a day. All of them read tons of books about everything and anything under the sun, from astronomy to politics to religion. All of that has helped these individuals, and I take out of their playbook to be able to firstly want and visualize where I want to go in this world. Regardless of what I know or what I don't know, I first need to want it, and then I need to figure out, how do I actually get there? And I've been lucky enough to have people that are my mentors, I would call a person really. And this person has guided me in so many ways that has really made me a better person, stronger, and working hard more. I work harder now than I did when I started out. And I do that because I can touch almost where I want to go, and still there's a beyond. And I visualize that and I take it into my body. I live it, I breathe it every single day. When I wake up, I think about it. I don't want to say I'm a person who's like completely obsessed with all of that, but I know there's something that I want to achieve, because I come from, if you don't know this part of my story, I come from a basic Cape Flats kind of background. And I needed to want to get out of that situation to be able to move forward. And every single day I'm alive, I know there's a possibility that I can revert back to that environment. And I don't want to do that. How do I prohibit from that happening? Is to work harder in what I want to achieve. So if I have certain competencies or lack thereof, I go work at that. If I want to be healthier, I go work at that. If I want to eat healthier, it's all in these small things that I do on a daily basis, or that we have to do on a daily basis, to be able to firstly want something better for ourselves, to want to be healthy, because you can't do anything if your health is not good. You can't succeed in any way. So there are certain, drinking water more, all of these little changes that you have to do in order for you to become a bookkeeper, a senior bookkeeper, a financial manager, a financial director, a CFO, and all the years in between of those things, and every single step that you have to move up. It's not just sitting every day at your computer for 12 hours and just being the best person. It's learning all these other different things, talking to people, taking care of yourself, because if you feel good, you look good, people think you are, competent. Even just looking good, taking care of yourself tells people there's a level of competency that you have, and they can take you forward in that.
You're making great connections to owning your career. Please, Tatula.
Because I think what I picked up from Jermaine is learn from other people. And that's something I had also thought is quite important. You can't learn everything on your own and learn it from books. There's lots of people who'll be working with you with massive, experience, and therefore you can glean information from them and actually also look at how they conduct themselves and learn and pick up from them. I mean, in one of the organizations I worked for, there was a lady who ultimately, she became a CEO. You could actually see, at the time she was a senior executive, but you could see this lady is on a mission, the way she does things. She is intentional about being excellent in what she is doing. And also just the way you project yourself. When you met her, you would know within 10 minutes, you know, she would literally sell herself, you know, to say, you know, when I was working at the presidency, I am the one who developed this and that policy. Now, how many of us have done work and we just forget, you know, that we have done that work? We don't talk about it. But with her, she made sure that you know that she has had an impact in the following manner. And from that time, I knew this is how you become a CEO. And she actually ultimately did become a CEO, you know, in one of the organizations. So it's about looking at attributes that you believe in or you aspire to in other people, and you learn from them. And then you can, rather than try to read everything, then you can quickly just learn from people and you gain a whole lot of experience.
Yeah, and emulate the behaviors that they have. It's so often we have to act as if we believe we are CEO worthy. We have to act as if we believe we are already where we want to be, because the alternative is to listen to the negative thoughts that you have in your head that keep you small. And so often we have to be curious about our thoughts, and we have to choose what we want to believe about ourselves and then act on that choice. John, you were smiling. I'm wondering if there's a comment there.
I wanted to speak about this thing of what you believe about yourself and about identity. I came across this phrase, the locus of control. It's speaking about where is your authority situated? And this relates to the question of labels and the number of letters behind your name and the importance that you attach to that. So essentially, I think the question around your label, what am I, who am I, as determined by my degree or my qualifications, is about giving over authority. It's about external validation. So I feel good if other people think that I'm good. But ultimately, that doesn't take you where you want to go. There's a spark inside each one of you, a unique spark. And it might feel like it's been buried for a long time. It might feel like it's in full operation at the moment. And very often, if you go back to when you were like 7 or 8 years old, that's what the spark really looks like. It'll have a different form now. But there's something inside of us that is genuine, that is in the end, the kind of a root of internal authority, which allows you to take risks, which allows you to try things that you're not sure about, which allows you to make mistakes, because your validation doesn't come from what other people think about you. And this is a lifelong journey. I think for all of us, we will have had times where I'm not sure if I'm capable of this, you know, the self-doubt and fear. And we need to pay attention to those little niggling voices in our heads, but we don't want to put them on center stage either. So I think there's great value in giving careful thought to where is my locus of authority, where am I getting my validation from?
Yeah, beautiful points.
Wow.
Thank you.
John, I really like what you just said. It reminds me of the exercise that we were requested to do last year when I was on the mentorship program, where we had to introduce ourselves without really mentioning our qualifications, our work experiences. Personally, for me, it was very tricky. I only knew my name. I didn't know what to say afterwards. It shows how, yes, we had given authority to external people or external factors. That qualification explains who I am. I don't know, somehow in us growing up, we have let go of who we are, or we thought what we have obtained in terms of qualifications and or experiences defines who we are. I need to work on that and get back to knowing who 𝗵𝗶 is without necessarily mentioning that I'm a methodologist, because that's not all I am. And then what I also liked from Jermaine, and also Dr. Tutula mentioned that a lot, is becoming intentional about where you want to go as a person, and start looking at, I mean, we can only associate it, we can mostly associate where we want to go with seeing the people who are there already. So you can look at what they do, you can look at what they have done, you can look at how they behave in terms of helping you becoming intentional about what is it that you need to do to get to where you want to be. And then we've got charts. I don't know if we can maybe start addressing some questions, because they ask questions as and when we talk about some interesting points that the people on the chat become interested in. There's one that I believe it's related to from Nokolo. She's asking about when is the right time to make a career change. She's asking whether the panelists planned their transitions or they allow themselves to be flexible and see where they end up. She knows where she wants to go, but she doesn't really know when is the right time to do it. So I felt that it speaks a lot with regards to, it speaks a lot to being intentional about what is it that you want to. So Jermaine, I know you've made a lot of transitions from geology to sales to general manager. Can you maybe assist Nokolo there?
Yeah, so, you know, I haven't really jumped from one company to another. But Amos has morphed, or the company that I work for has morphed into something that I was willing to adapt with over time. And so for me, the thing that I wanted is this environment sustainable for me and the growth path that I'm wanting for myself? And every single time I asked myself this question, I reassessed the environment I was in, and I could from there ascertain, okay, am I going to another, let's say, mining services company, because that's what my experience would allow for? And am I going to sell another thing? And am I going to have to prove myself to the executives of that company again to be able to get where I'm going? So the thing that was central for me was the end point, still is the end point of where I want to go in terms of my professional career. Does it help me in the ability to garner the experience to become an entrepreneur at the end of all of this? Because all of us really want to do something for ourselves. There is, in every single human, I believe, there's something that you want to do for yourself. And so would it help me to jump from company to company to company? Am I going to garner the experiences and things that I need to be able to do that? Every single time, if I answer that question and I had like specific criteria in my head, you can write it down. If it could do that for me, then I was going to stay. And if it was not serving me anymore in the organization that I am, then it would allow me to move. And I've met very interesting people at different organizations and to all over the world where we go. And I speak to these people and I find myself wondering, like Dr. Tutula said, am I a big fish in a small pond, or am I a person who really wants to be in this pond for a little while longer to be able to go out into the ocean and venture for myself? So that has kept me here. And I think that's the question that we all should always ask once you want to make let's say a vertical move or a lateral move. Is it going to serve where I want to be in the future? If the answer is yes, then move. And if the answer is no, then I would say stay where you are.
Okay, perfect. I would like to come in there. You know, I say unfortunately, because there are people in life who have these big plans for their life. Now, my life really hasn't, maybe at some point I had an idea. In high school, I made a statement that I would like to be a professor of genetics. I didn't know what genetics was at the time. And probably when I knew what genetics is, I mean, during apartheid, as Jermaine said, I mean, it was totally out. At that time, people who were good at school became doctors or lawyers or accountants. That was just about it, and a few, nurse and teacher. All these other fancy careers that you all have, they were not there. So, however, I think ideally I would have become an academic. I should have been an academic, but life happens, and I ended up needing to be in well-paying jobs, and academia is not well-paying. So what I'm trying to say is, one didn't get where one is through a clear plan. It was a question of, at some point, what prevailed was, I need to be earning a good salary. And fortunately, some of the jobs then, most of the time, actually, all of my jobs, except one, were actually, I was headhunted for those jobs. And I was saying earlier that the one job that I looked for, I hunted down, it was my worst job. But so in a way, it means I'm able to change, to move where I believe people have got faith that I can, be effective. But I think in Noxolo's case, she actually says she would love to go into consulting. And I think that's a great start, because she is quite clear, I would like to do consulting. And therefore, what you need to be doing, Noxolo, is to say, you look at other people who are consulting, how are they consulting? How did they get there? And you can then map out how, the steps you need to take, whether maybe it is skills or it is knowledge that you need to add, or it's actually networks. Because when it comes to consulting, networks are very important. I haven't consulted, but certainly I do know that networking is very important, and therefore building those networks now when you are still employed, because again, if you're consulting, you are working for yourself, and that transition from, being employed to consulting needs to be managed very well, because you can jump too quickly, but then you don't have a good base. Whereas if you make sure that you build slowly your reputation, as someone who can be a consultant, and also those networks, and then you can jump and move over into consulting. So all I'm saying is, most of us, our lives are not this very clear map we had from, the beginning, that this is where I want to go, and you get there. There's a lot of detours, a lot of dead ends on the way. But in this case, certainly, when you do have a vision for yourself, you need to pursue it and just make sure that what you are doing is building towards that vision.
And perhaps to be adaptable enough to know that sometimes the vision you have for yourself is based on a version of you that you didn't know very well, and that your vision can change. And as you get to know yourself better, your vision probably will change. We've got another question here, and that's from Valencia. And Valencia's asked, how does one maintain an attitude to pursue growth when your external environment is not designed to accommodate for it, limiting factors such as lack of time, stress, etc.? Open to the panel, anybody can answer that.
If I can, that's a difficult question, because my MO is always to take myself out of any environment that pulls me down in whatever form it comes, so that I can be in a mindset of, growth or prosperity or advancing anything in my daily life. I don't know if there's any other means, and if those things are things that you can't remove, then I think the theoretical answer I would have is then to try and change them the best that you can, or to change your mindset in it. because I don't know if growth and, you know, negativity, if I could call it that, or any limiting factor goes hand in hand. Again, what I can go back to is the idea of grit and pushing through any circumstance that you face and trying to find the best, I guess, the path of least resistance in order to get to a space where that fosters growth and that's, you know, ideal for something to grow. Other than that, I'm at a loss.
I've got some thoughts on this. I'll go back to where do you get your validation from? So if your external environment is not helping you grow, then I think it might be worth going to, like, looking inside yourself and thinking, how do I want to grow? And what control do I have over that process? What are the pieces of this puzzle that I can do something about? There are usually factors around us which make life quite difficult and challenging. And in my experience, it's a kind of, so looking inside, being quiet and kind of asking this question, what do I really want? It's not a question that you can answer quickly, but to delve deep inside and say, what do I really want? What do I see for myself in maybe 5 years' time? And what kind of a person do I want to be in 5 years' time? Not necessarily what title do I want, but what kind of character would I like in 5 years' time? And how could I help myself grow towards that?
And if I could just add again on that, Brian, if you don't mind, is she mentioned time and stress specifically, right? With time and stress, that's stuff we all face. And we have to find, I think you need to prioritize what it is that's more important in order to make the time for the thing that you want to achieve. Is really prioritizing one's life, and time management is something that we all learn forever. It's not something that we ever get 100% right, but we have to prioritize. And with regards to stress, I have only one tool, and that's exercise, me personally. Anything that goes wrong in my life, whatever it is, I go run, I go to the gym, I go take a hike, and the world is just better. For some other people, it's, you know, religion, and that makes it helps them to get through the stress of it all. It's always to find, and like John just said, it's looking in yourself to find what will solve the stress, but you can only know that once you try a few things. So my go-to for that happens to be exercise. And once I've done that, it doesn't matter what I did, there's some other, and I know it's hormones, but I feel so powerful at the end that I can do it, I can take it. That's how I feel normally after that. So maybe it's healthy habits that help you with stress and time.
Definitely. It's, you know, the fact is we all have exactly the same amount of hours in the day, and the choices we make and how we invest our effort and time in those 24 hours a day is the difference between achieving what we want to achieve and sometimes feeling victim to external circumstances. And there's a quote from 𝗕𝗿𝗶𝗶 𝗿𝗏 that I really think is that helps me navigate things. And he asks two questions. If I say yes to this, who or what am I saying no to as a result? And if I say no to this, what or whom can I say yes to because of it? And it's such simple questions, but the moment you start to evaluate your choices on a daily basis with those two questions, it suddenly starts to open up all sorts of time that's available to you when you say no to things that are time eaters, and when you say yes to things that have a much greater return of investment in relation to the goals that you want to achieve. So I would encourage you to be asking yourself those questions on a daily basis. If I say no to this, what can I say yes to? And if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to as a result? Have we got more questions? Yes.
If I can maybe just add on to what V asked, with regards to the environment that's not really helping out in terms of what one wants to achieve. I can align it to what both Jermaine and Dr. Tutula also mentioned with regards to being intentional about what is it that you want to achieve. And I mean, Dr. Tutula did mention that also sometimes the environment or the circumstances that you are in doesn't necessarily help you at that instant moment to achieve what you want to achieve. But I believe there are many ways to kill a cat. I can give an example to say, there was a time that where I worked, far away from Johannesburg, it was really, I wanted to quit, but I couldn't quit. I mean, having 2 daughters to care for, there was just no way I'm gonna quit. And then I knew that the only way to get a better salary was to get out of that company, but nothing was happening at that moment. But one thing that I had control over was to acquire a skill or even knowledge. Then I registered to have another qualification. And that's when I also then, before that, that's when I reviewed, assisted my superior with regards to proofreading his dissertation when he was doing PhD. And before I knew it, before I even completed that qualification, I got a new job. And I quickly even forgot about what I was going through. But it was the longest 4 years of my life where I really went through the most, and I didn't see any way out. But there's always at least 1 or 2 things that you can do on your own without requiring support from your immediate environment that can help you out of that situation. All right, thank you. Okay.
John, I wanted to ask you a question about competence for what in relation to context. You'd said earlier when we were chatting before everybody joined that as a nature guide during COVID, you couldn't work because your job requires you to be in nature. And I'm wondering how you built the competence to continue working given that your context had changed. What are some of the things that you did in order to make yourself relevant in a changed world?
Well, the first thing was it was actually a little identity crisis. I needed to generate income, and I actually couldn't even leave the yard at one point. And so I decided to start a knife sharpening business during hard lockdown. And the hardest part of starting that was, is this who I am? Can I call myself a knife sharpener and not a nature guide? I've always been a nature guide. Now what? That was the hardest transition, to say I can be both. So I managed to get over that hurdle, which was very frightening. But there was spirituality is deeply important to me, and I pray and I ask for help. And the message that I got was the sense of it's okay to be both. You don't have to stick to one thing. So that was the one. And then as lockdown changed and the geology walks became popular, again, a little crisis of confidence. Well, I'm back to being a nature guide. Now, what do I call myself? A nature and geology guide. There's nobody doing this anywhere in the world that I can see. So a little step of faith to say, I don't know if I'm quite competent yet, but I think I've got enough building blocks, and I think I've got enough people to help me to take this step and call myself a nature and geology guide and start something new. And that's the kind of personal journey into those changes.
Yeah, I mean, that resonates so strongly with my transition from being an environmental risk consultant to moving into coaching. I left a 19-year career and an identity and moved into coaching, and it took me about 3 years before I could confidently call myself a coach. And I'm just wondering, again, so identity is a label. Jermaine, you've talked about your label of I'm a geologist, can I move into sales? Is this a kind of a real thing? 𝗕𝗃𝗓, identity kind of crises for you in transitioning and kind of building competence in your career?
Yes, I did have one, and it's the job I said was the one I looked for and was my worst job. And looking back, I think, okay, number one, there was a bigger push factor out of the job I was at. And sometimes it's about whatever job, you know, I get. And unfortunately, yes, it had health in it. So I felt I should be able to do the job. But the job itself was a health analyst. And looking at my fellow analysts, over time, I saw that they were comfortable in what they were doing because they had academic backgrounds. So yes, I was a health trained person, but I did not have a huge bank of knowledge, which I was then just applying as an analyst to my job. And most of my colleagues had, you know, were academics, PhDs, some of them, which meant they had like volumes of, you know, expertise or knowledge, which they were just applying. And I found myself having to now try and come up with writing up things, you know, and I think the lesson there was there are some things that you can't just acquire in terms of knowledge over a very short period of time, because I was hired, it was a highly paying job, but I was expected to be applying knowledge. That knowledge was not there in a, you know, yes, I was a doctor, I know a whole lot of things, but I was not having a depth of knowledge, which is what my other colleagues had as academics. So it sort of did not work. And actually, in the end, I was very happy to leave that job because the fit wasn't quite there, really. It would have taken me 10 years to sort of acquire enough knowledge so that I'll be able to apply as easily as my other colleagues. Yeah.
What strikes me from that is, go ahead.
It's interesting to hear that, to hear and understand that what made you competent on your previous jobs doesn't necessarily make you competent in that specific one. And then I think it took a great courage for you to admit that you didn't know and you couldn't really know quickly to be able to apply the knowledge that you needed at the time. It takes courage. How did you bounce back? Because sometimes one's confidence can really be dented from that. How did you quickly bounce back? I mean, it's on that career, but it can even happen in a boardroom where one can say a really silly comment, for a lack of a better word, and then you keep quiet throughout the meeting or the discussion because of that one wrong or bad comment that one made. So how did you bounce back from that when you moved to a different job?
Okay, I think what helped was I stayed 4 years, and in the second year, I decided to apply for an MBA. And maybe it was a way of, you know, refocusing myself. And the MBA was quite exciting. And I suspect if I had not done that MBA, my levels of confidence could have been seriously challenged in terms of very difficult to come back. But the MBA, which I did, it really lifted me in terms of, you know, the knowledge I was gaining, the networks. It was I was one of the older people in class, so all these young, vibrant people. in fact, I had not answered that question for myself. It's only now that I'm answering it, to realize that actually what saved me was doing that MBA, because it buoyed me, it lifted my spirits, it gave me this hope, you know, and I then was headhunted to go into the current role that I'm in, which fortunately for me, the role was fairly similar to the work I had done before. So it was fairly fish I hope it's not in a small pond, but it was fish in water again. So
Yeah.
that's how I managed to recover and did not have a permanent damage from, you know, having been in that job. Thanks.
No, I think the point for me is you can be incompetent in a particular context or in a particular position, but that doesn't make you incompetent. It just means, and to pick up on being a fish in water, it just means you're a fish in a tree instead of a fish in water. And I think so often we make the assumption that because I'm not coping here, I am incompetent everywhere. And for a lot of us, it's so important to really know ourselves well and know in what contexts we thrive, and to make sure that we are, as far as possible, in contexts where we thrive. Because when we're in a context where we thrive, we can be magnificent and we feel safe and we can learn and we can grow and we can do all sorts of things. But when we're in a context where no matter what we do, we're never going to thrive, we're only ever going to struggle, it's going to reconfirm for you this identity of not being competent. And this really connects to being able to lead yourself and grow your self-awareness about in what situations you are the best version of yourself. And I think that's a really important point for all of us, is we so often bash our heads against a brick wall trying to be competent, where actually we're just a fish in a tree. And
in fact, if I can jump in
will
there,
be amazing.
If I can jump in there, Brioni, the one thing I have learned is we also need to listen to our gut. Because what you're talking about is, you know, it's more about feel. What is it that I feel good about, I enjoy doing? And moving forward in your career, you will work better if you listen to your gut. You know, what are the things that when I'm doing, I then feel light, I feel happy doing them? And which are the things which, when I'm doing those, then I have this heavy feeling, you know, it pulls me down. It's very important to identify those things. Because, I mean, for instance, with me, which is why I say I could have been an academic, if I have to write something, and fortunately at Minerals Council, there's a lot of writing to be done. I know that I have this light feeling, you know, I look forward to the writing. Even when I'm procrastinating, not writing, it's there in my mind. I'm writing it in my brain. I can already see how I'm going to write it. And it's a question of sitting down and writing it. Whereas I've had colleagues who they maybe are not made that way. They are not made for writing. And you can actually see that them having to write something, I'm sure they have this very heavy feeling, you know, because they have to write. So you need to listen to your gut when you're doing things. Know which ones give you that light feeling and know which ones are dragging you down, because it means you need to do less of the ones which drag you down and do more of the ones that really make you feel light.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Where do I feel light? Where do I feel energized? Where do I feel impactful? Where do I feel challenged in a way that's growing me? These are all questions we need to ask ourselves.
Ryan, if I can add to that, right?
Yeah.
Is that sometimes we are contextually speaking, we feel that we are in a position where we cannot grow. Let's say it's in a company, or let's make a specific example about a company. And a lot of the times you are in your head more than that is the reality. You feel like my manager doesn't like me, no one here likes me, I'm not fitting into this culture, but at the same time, you are not trying. And you might tell yourself, I am trying to do this and the other, but I'm not allowed. In my experience, what I've seen is that a lot of the times you are in your head more than that is the reality. And what you need to realize is that what you think is going on 99% of the times is not the case. And so what I have done, at least in an Amos context, is that I've always been, and Amos allows for that, is that I've always been able to put up my hand when I was a technical salesperson to go and learn about production stuff and put on an overall, be in a production facility and do stock take. And then from a stock pick perspective, I get an insight into the finance world as well and consumables on the ground and actually how everything works on a technical level with regards to production, that is. I've put my hands up when the help was just needed and there was no one else to help. I put my hand up and said, let me do it, even if I had to stay a bit of extra time. And in that case, it was not intentional. It was because there was a level of ownership in the business that I work for that I had in my mind, even though I am not an owner in any way, shape, or form. But I respected the organization I worked for. And so that was the reason why I put up my hand in all these different things. If there was an opportunity to go do finance for non-financial people or technical people, I put up my hand, let me go. And the only reason was like, I wanted to get a better understanding of it. There was no intention behind it of, okay, it's going to take me to X, Y, and Z level. There's an idea that sometimes you put yourself, you learn certain things. Let's say you are picking up trash on a corner, and you don't know what that competency is going to get you over time, the ability to go and just pick up the trash. But over time, these accumulation of things will position you in such a manner that an opportunity just happens to own us, a serendipitous moment where all these things align. And that is not really something you can apply for or you can plan for, really. It's just something that happens because you've put yourself out there, you've stepped into the river, and the river is not necessarily always a challenge. It's just taking yourself out of the comfort zone, looking into oneself and realizing that, you know what, I might not always be right in this situation. What's going on in my head is just in my head. And the more we tell ourselves that, the more we'll be able to socialize and network. Even networking, oh, terror of my life, hate it with a passion. But my boss once took me to a conference and said, you know what, you're supposed to speak now. And I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to do it? I naturally have sweaty palms and I have to take these people's hands. It's a good way of, and I did it. And every single time I had to take that person's hands, I wiped my hand and I see them, I noticed them wiping their hand off their, trouser or whatever it is. And that happened for years. And now I don't have that anymore. I didn't want to do it to start off with. I just wanted to speak to my customers and hide in a corner and have my weekend and, as we call it now, go groove. And that was my life. But I did all these things that I didn't know why I was doing them. But now I have direction because all of that led to me being in the space that I am. And I do thoroughly believe in a serendipitous moment, but you prepare yourself for it unconsciously sometimes, and you just have to put up your hand and take yourself out of your head.
100%. And everything you're talking about is about taking ownership of your career. And you take your skills, you take your experience, you take your everything that you gain through taking ownership of your career, you take that with you. And it becomes yours. It becomes part of the business of who you are. And that's so much of what we're talking about in the mentoring program, is driving your career intentionally by taking ownership of every single aspect of it, not waiting for somebody to put something on your plate, but just stepping in to take opportunities because they interest you, because you can, because there's an opportunity there to learn, and with no other objective other than to build the business of yourself. And so I really want to thank you for that. And having seen you in conferences, I'm astounded that you ever started off by not liking networking. Yeah. You hide that well.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge. It's a continuous challenge, but I'm better at it now than I was then.
seamless as far as I can say. So we've got 7 minutes left. I think we need to get some concluding comments from our panelists. And I also want to ask everybody who's left in the room to maybe in the chat just write a sentence or two about what you've taken from this. What's a highlight? What's a takeaway point? What's a lesson? Something that you've gained from this conversation, because we'll extract those from the chat and put them into a post on LinkedIn tomorrow. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. But while everybody's typing those things into the chat, let's hear from our panelists. And maybe 𝗕𝗃𝗓, as our female panelist, we can ask you to go first.
Okay, no, I would say that maybe one needs to always be, when you get to, especially in a new environment, you need to assess what it is, part of the competency you need to improve, But if it is knowledge, then you do that quickly, or if it is a skill, but always, because, your aptitude, your attitude, and your behaviors, can really get you far. As we've heard from Jermaine, there's a lot that you can gain just from your behaviors. So even without doing the knowledge and the skills, just making sure that, you've got this positive attitude, you put in the right behaviors, and you are seen as someone who is really an asset to the organization, it gets you far. So that would be my, suggestion to anyone who is getting into a new environment.
Thank you for that. John?
Yeah, I've got a short phrase, and then I'll do something which you might not be expecting. And the phrase is to take a beautiful risk. And early on in my nature guiding career, I found myself wanting to incorporate music into my work, and no one was doing that. I couldn't see how one could do it, and it felt very strange. But I took a beautiful risk, and it's got a geological connection. The instrument I'm going to play is part of it is made of steel, and we have geologists to thank for that.
Oh, wow.
So take a beautiful risk.
What a beautiful risk. I had one of those as a child. I never played it anywhere close to like that. Thank you, John.
Sure.
Jermaine?
My closing remarks, first of all, John, that was beautiful. It made me really calm. I think if that's the idea, then that it worked completely. For everyone that's here today, I would like to say there's nothing wrong in being ambitious. If you're an ambitious person, go for what you want in whatever way you see fit. Just take the risk of doing it at least let there be an action. And like Dr. 𝗕𝗃𝗓 has told us, like John has said, there's no real way at the end of it. You can't really plan for it. And I believe that, even though I would like to think I have some sort of blueprint, I recognize every single day the fact that I have to reinforce what I believe means that there's actually no way forward. So if you are that person who ambitious, say it loud and say it proud. And in addition to that, work hard for what you want. Never be scared of any environment. Put yourself out there. And at the end of it all, you have to believe that that will realize in the long journey that it is. And slow and steady does win the race. You don't have to, achieve everything all at once and be Insta famous or TikTok, whatever. you'll be fine. And just keep at it and keep going. We are all in this together. We are all doing it every day.
Beautiful conclusion.
Thank you. Thank
𝗕𝗏𝗄,
you.
do you want to wrap it up for us?
I just want to thank our panelists. Jermaine, it's so nice to, it was refreshing to listen to you. The energy, the spark, the confidence. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Dr. Tutula, I was your student for the past 6 months. You made me speak a lot. It was refreshing to hear you speak this long for a change. Thank you for making time and coming through to speak to us. Always is a pleasure having a session with you. Mr. Rolf, when I grow up, I want to be confident and calm like you. I really appreciate you taking the time to come through. And to all the people online, thank you really to making time to join us. This is what was really insightful, and I really hope you had gained as much as I have. And then, yeah, thank you, Bryony. Thank you, IMSA. This is refreshing. I'm always looking forward to our Tuesday evenings, especially this one session. Thank you.
𝗕𝗏𝗄, thank you for taking a beautiful risk on yourself and facilitating this session so wonderfully. And thank you to everybody for being here. Panelists, you've been great. I think we've learned a lot. Based on the chat, there is a lot that everybody's taking away. And with that, 𝗏𝗓𝗄, thank you for hosting us. Raksha, good evening and have a wonderful night further. We will see you again in the next session in a month's time.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.